there were overtly satanic bands that just were against God that I can't even listen to that anymore. Like, even if I'm listening to a song from a band that's still kind of in my wheelhouse a little bit, like there'll be a song like that comes on and I'm like, oh no, that's coming off. Like, that's out of the wheelhouse. I'm like, I forgot that they said that. I can't even have that. You know what I mean? It's not that I don't know. Like, I was never a person that really gravitated to the lyrics of the music anyway. I was always like, ooh, let me find out.
Kind of the vibe of it.
Ooh, is that drummer good? Can I air drum to that guy? You know, if the guitarist and the drummer put together good music, then I'll like it. Lyrics are kind of an afterthought. But yeah.
Ooh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, come on, let's go.
Dude, okay. So exactly what you just said. You get captivated by the instruments, and at the time.
Yep.
And you didn't care about the lyrics.
Yep.
Do you find, okay, there's two ways I want to take this.
Let's go.
So one way is, like I said, I don't listen to a lot of rap, but if I hear like a faith-leaning or faith-based or faith-driven rap song, I will definitely like pop off to that, like kind of go crazy, like enjoy it like I would an old rap song. But there are some that when they hear any type of rap, regardless of if it's faith-driven or not, because of the form that it is presented in, they're just waiting for it to be, or they just immediately associate it to. So similarly, like, what are your thoughts on people that listen to the overall sound of it without consuming the actual content and lyrics of music, whether it's metal to the satanic part or rap that should and does look bad and you associate it poorly, but it's actually a faith-based thing that encourages faith and being proud in the Lord. Yeah,
well, so there are so many different avenues with that, because part of it is musical is just taste in what people like. Some people focus on lyrics. Like, I've got some of my friends are like, oh, I listen to music for the lyrics, and other people are like, I don't even care about that at all. But the fact that people can sometimes set aside the message and just say, well, this is presented as rap and I don't like anything about rap culture, so I'm not even going to lean in at all, I think is so short-sighted. And that's coming from a metalhead. Like, you know, it's like, I don't typically vibe with that kind of music, but I'm not going to shut it off because, you know, because of how it's presented or any of that. Like, I grew up in the early 90s when hip hop was really coming in. So, you know, so much of what makes up JD is some of that really old school, like Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg. Like, so much of that is ingrained in me to where I'm not going to immediately shut something down because it's not what I'm familiar with. And you also don't give music a chance if you're just going to chop it off like that.
No.
You miss so many good parts of it. Now, I wish for myself I could gravitate more to worship music. I'm getting there.
Right.
88.3 comes on a little bit more in my car, especially when my wife is there, because we don't want to present the wrong thing to the kids either. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, even the search for finding bands in my genre that play the music that I like, but the message isn't, you know, kill everybody and, you know, let's create an altar to the devil. Like, you know, that stuff is like, I can't even hear that anymore.
Yeah, man. I hear that, and it definitely is a work in progress to like get to where like the worship music is more consistent, because some people, they, like you said, they can throw on Z88.3 and they are just off to the races. I'm not gonna lie, there are still some. I saw one meme, and the meme goes, it's like, so it's a worship band on stage, and there's the lyrics posted, and the lyrics are, "This is a contemporary worship song. This is a contemporary worship song."
I've seen that.
He's that like 5-6 times.
Yep.
And I'm like, yo, why is that so true?
Yep.
It's like, it'd be good, but yeah, they do repeat a lot of this.
Yep. That is so true, dude.
And it's, I can't shake it because it's, you know, so now when I listen, I'm like, it's doing the thing.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think that media, and this is something that there's a couple of places that I feel like the church space and the religious space is very weak in. And the two main spaces are, one, I think the church space is very weak when it comes to the media side of how they portray themselves and creating good content. And then the second place is, and this may be controversial, but I think the church is weak at raising men to be effective men in 2023.
Yeah.
And going in order of that, as far as the media part, so something that's recently taken off is obviously things like The Chosen, Jesus Revolution, Sound of Freedom.
Yep.
These are, and they have absolutely shattered records for the type of medium they're created on. This is some of the first good Christian content that's Jesus based since Passion of the Christ, which also like shattered everything and it is constantly still referenced. And when you see good media, it blows my mind how some Christians who are so dogmatic will shoot it down because it doesn't adhere to their sect of belief of whether it's implying the idea of free grace or whether it's referencing what they may feel like referencing a Bible verse out of context.
Yeah.
And so, like, what are your thoughts on the way that Christians view media, both in not only how they create it, how they consume it, how they support it, and just all things media related?
Yeah, so I've actually talked about that before, and I think really a lot of it has to do with a technological shift. Obviously, as we start to talk about all these new media and stuff like that, the biggest thing that I've seen is it's not so much. Oh man, how do I say this? I think it's like people are rigid and they want their Christianity the way they grew up, and you miss all the opportunity for raising up the next generation. Yeah. The flip side with all that is, in the New Testament, Jesus says, "Follow me, and I'll teach you how to be fishers of men." Do you think he would use the same bait every single time? You know what I mean?
100%.
Like if you're going and you're fishing for one type of fish and it's not biting, you're like, well, I need to use something different. And the church, I think, has a responsibility to. This is going to sound crazy, but embrace technology. God didn't give us a brain and make us creative beings for us to not use what's available to us. I've heard so many people talk about, well, we shouldn't have a rock band at church. Well, why not? If that saves one person because they like that kind of music or vibe, why would we not do that? I don't get it. And yeah, it's also too people of faith coming alongside the new technology and saying, we're going to produce something like The Chosen on a medium like Amazon and say, we're going to put our money where our mouth is and we're going to produce something that isn't some hokey thing that the world is going to laugh at because we take Jesus seriously enough to take it serious.
That's such a good point. Like, because before something like The Chosen and since the Passion, like when I thought of like Christian-centered content, I did think of like this very like cringe-inducing,
100%,
like, overly like
they're trying too hard.
Yeah, and it's just like they didn't have any sense of like real-world tone to it, and it seemed like it was made for that people that all could get it, and like there was like no outsider appeal to it. And when you watch The Chosen, just the ambience that they set up, I mean, the lighting is beautiful. The
Yep.
angles, like the focus, the way that some of the shots linger on faces to imply things, like the cinematography of just how they do it is, you can tell that there's so much care and love and just time put into, we need to make this hit, like we're gonna try all these, and you can really just see, like, man, they spent real time and real money on this thing.
Yeah.
And that has to be so much better than all of this stuff that is super strictly, like, perfectly because, and the point of me getting into that is, even when, like, let's say, for example, you and I, right? So each of us sort of had our hangups about faith in certain ways. For you, it was the behavior that you saw, and you didn't like it. For me, it was, I was into a game called Yu-Gi-Oh! As a kid.
Okay.
And as a kid, I had thousands of dollars. If I still had those cards, I'd have tens of thousands of dollars worth of cards right now. Upset I got into faith, threw away all my Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards because the belief around them was they were demonic. And then growing up, I'm like, you know what? They're not demonic. I just want to hang out, play with them. You know, my friends play with them. Da-da-da-da-da. For you, like I said, you were like, my friends do metal. I don't see it as demonic.
Yeah.
Da-da-da-da-da. And then, so the interesting thing is, if we had it the way that either some fundamentalist, traditionalist would have it, by their standard, neither of us well, maybe you would have, because you went for your family.
Yeah.
And because of a desperate need. And at a certain point, I went because of a desperate need, and I was looking to fill something. Mm-hmm. And so we ended up there, but maybe we were able to actually not find it so grating to be there, because there were these things to break down the walls and show, like, oh, this isn't nearly as awful as I remember it in the past. Like, because my memories before that was, like, going into a place and it being very cold.
Yep.
And it being impossible to keep my eyes open. I was so sleepy.
Yep.
And my stepmom shoving her arm into me, telling me to wake up.
Wake up, yeah.
And, like, those are my memories, like, horrific memories.
Yeah.
And now, the exact same way, like, now here you are these years later, and you're like, huh, I didn't see it at the time, but I actually do lean at this metal song is demonic.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the stumbling block, for those that don't know what a stumbling block is, it is anything that gets in the way of your ability to get closer to God.
Yep.
For you was that you didn't see good representatives. And so even though maybe what your father was saying at that time was correct, because of the spirit he had as he gave it to you, and, like, that feeling of it being something that tore you guys apart, that kept you away from it, even though you ended up arriving there.
Yeah. Yep.
And for me, I indulged in all these different things anime-wise and all these things that are seemingly harmless, but little by little, I can't help but see, like, when I look at Yu-Gi-Oh! And I look at how many characters were dressed in ways that were meant to be provocative, that had to be censored for US release, that were clearly devils and demons on different cards. I'm like, oh man, even though I really enjoyed it as a kid, it really was as demonic as I was told in childhood.
Yep.
And to be clear, like, it wasn't like I was forced to throw away the cards, but I was, like, heavily encouraged, and then, like, the whiplash of that, because, like, I still had friends that did it, and I felt like it pulled me away from those friends. The whiplash was, okay, I'm just gonna step away from religion for a while, and when I get older and I'm ready to handle it, then I'm gonna do it.
Yeah.
And so,
I think so. But you said something so interesting, and this is the way I'm trying to frame things, and I'm not trying to make excuses for any of my behavior, even though this may sound totally like that. But I don't think we're put on this world to not enjoy things. We have to put them in perspective, and we can't make an idol out of them.
Yeah.
You know, Jesus is Lord, and as so long as you can look at everything and say, okay, I'm going to compartmentalize these things. I'm going to remove what I need to remove. Jesus is Lord. There are no other lords before me. Like, even the whole, we can turn anything into an idol. Money, video games, music, all of that. But like, God is Lord.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part, because we're in this world not to be conformed to it, but to transform it. Maybe I butchered that, but
I think you get it.
Yeah. the premise of it. Yeah, we just can't be in it and make everything else the idol.
Yeah.
Keep your eyes focused on the Lord. And it's a constant struggle.
Yeah. And like, so I don't know about you, but I like to dive into like different pieces of doctrine and theology and whatnot and just see about it. And so when I see something that's like, oh, this thing right here may be suggestive of a demon, like that, the weight that has as I allow myself to kind of entertain a piece of doctrine for a while to see, like, is there credence to it? Does it have credibility, or is it just something that is like there's no scriptural legs to it and whatnot? I can see how people get to that place of that dogmaticism, and then like it drives home an appreciation for me when I think about things like the Old Testament, and we think about things like Pharisees, and we're like, man, why couldn't these people get it that like the whole point of the law was to be in love, and it was to be like a guiding thing.
Yep.
And why couldn't they get Jesus? How could you have this person here perfectly represents these things?
Yeah.
And like just deny him? And then I think about like, and this was people that knew about like the ground opening up to swallow people that didn't believe.
Yeah.
And people being burned at the altar because they did something not the exact way that God wanted. So like, if anything, I understand the Pharisees, and I understand the Pharisees of today.
Yep.
And it really, like, that really makes it make sense. Like, even one person that I've been like watching to learn about the idea of like demonization, casting out demons. I was watching a piece of content, and like just the way that he spoke, calling people idiots and these morons over here, and you're demon possessed if you're doing that.
Yeah.
Like, I just look at that and I just think like, right now as a 28-year-old, I watch that and I get what he's saying and why he's saying it. If I was 13, 14 years old though, and I saw that guy, I'd be like, this guy's a jerk.
Yeah. 100%.
He's supposed to reflect Jesus, but he's nothing like Jesus. Why would I?
Yeah.
And so do you ever find yourself in that struggle to remember like, yes, I should study and learn more, and I should seek holiness, but also like, let me not turn into that thing. And I think you alluded to it as you mentioned arguments with your sons and things like that. But are there any other ways that you find yourself like battling that, and how do you keep that reminder in place?
Yeah. So one area that I found myself separating from how I wanted to be was social media. I have a Facebook, but I found myself so many times on Facebook or Twitter and even on Reddit where like I'm arguing with strangers over the internet about faith, and I'm not arguing to win them to faith. I'm arguing so I can prove a point to somebody I'll never meet face to face. So that's the total wrong approach. You're right. You're talking about, looking at something as a 13-year-old, that guy's a jerk. Well, that's what they're thinking about me.
Yeah.
And instead of, trying to come alongside somebody, I'm literally, using the Bible as a tool to argue people. And that's the wrong use of it. That's not what it's for.
Yeah.
So I totally get that.
Such a good example, because I was on the other day and I saw somebody clearly baiting, trying to get a response.
Yeah.
You people who believe in the Bible, you guys are part of a death cult. You think that you need to worship somebody that was sacrificed and that his blood covers everything. That is the definition of a death cult. And like, there was that part of me that wants to jump in and be like, you think this is a death call?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wait a second.
Yeah.
First of all, clearly you're not in the headspace to enter into this conversation.
Yeah.
So I just had to shut the computer,
Yeah.
like go away from it, like go to YouTube, look up something else.
Yeah. I totally get that, man.
But like, it is so that thing of like stopping from just emotionally rebuttaling what is being said, and instead just offering that thing of, hey, look, I see and I understand how you think this, and like that thing of, and they call it apologetics. Being able to empathize with the other side and understand them and all that jazz. And some people have a problem with apologetics. They say, "Oh, you're watering down the gospel, the word, and all that." But man, I guess the benefit, because we came from like looking at rock music, and things like fog machines and all these things, and like the idea of what is your opinion on like merch in a church?
Oh, that's so funny. At one point, I had gone to one of our pastors, and I'd been like, I just said, what about Jesus flipping over the money changer tables? Like, what about all that? How can we even sell anything like that in a church? So that's still kind of, it's a little bit difficult for me to wrap my head around. So long as the church is not using it as a profit center, like we're not driving people to come into the church to buy a shirt.
Yeah.
We're pulling people into the church where, hey, find community, learn about Jesus. We're full of broken people who need a savior. Hey, by the way, we do have a shirt.
Yeah.
But that's not why you're here. You're not here to go over to the merchandise desk and get a shirt so we can line the coffers. We're not. So long as that's the perspective, I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Because, many times wearing a church shirt, you're a walking billboard. I remember I was wearing my I Love My Church shirt. I ran into somebody at like the RDV over in like Maitland area, and the guy goes, "Hey, I love my church too. Where are you from?" So it sparks a conversation. Just two believers that pass by each other. And, hey, I see you, I notice you, I get you. So there's that component to it as well too.
Yeah, and I do think that that's like the verse that everyone thinks about. Oh, he flipped over tables.
Yeah.
And as I look at that one, and also, first, clearly we should not be using the church as a get rich quick place. As a this profit is to line the pockets. Like that is clearly the first thing. Going to a church for anything other than worship of the Lord and to build His kingdom is any purpose that you go there other than that is wrong. When it comes to things like selling things, I believe that the things that were being sold were things like clean doves, ox, sheep, basically animals that you would use as sin offerings or things like that. So they were locking essentially forgiveness and salvation behind a money barrier. And then in order to access that, they had to pay the money. And that's where Jesus' wrath was in. And when I think of it from that, it's not that there is not commerce allowed at all in it, because we know that in Corinthians it tells us that the saints should be taken care of and compensated by those that they feed with the Spirit. And so we know that commerce is in particular ways allowed, but it's when you start making it like this one pastor that I saw online. His name is, I'm going to say it because he's proud of the message that he preaches, Richard Lorenzo.
Mm-hmm.
And he literally says, when you come to church, if you are required to tithe,
mm-hmm.
you should be giving 10% plus offering, so more.
Mm-hmm.
And when this thing comes up, your attitude should be, oh yes, it's time to give money to the church. Oh yeah, I'm so excited. And when I look at that, and his thing was, if you are stingy with God, then he'll be stingy with his salvation.
Yeah.
That is the exact scenario that I think it may seem like just going to the extreme of it.
Yeah.
But that's the scenario that I look at when I think of the table flipping scenario.
Yeah.
More so than a merch table.
Yeah.
Where it's available, it's here, there's maybe some person that's manning it, offering it, versus
making an exchange for salvation.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny you brought that up. I remember the first paycheck I ever got when I was working, my first job ever was Boston Market. And my dad said to me, he goes, no, you have to tithe out of that. And me, in my infinite wisdom, I said to him, well, if God owns it all, he doesn't need my money. And he, just as quick as that came out of my mouth, he's like, he doesn't need your money. He needs your obedience. Yeah, it's like, dang, he hit me right in the face with that. Yep.
Jay, and he was just
boom,
right back on with it.
Yep. Like as quick as that came out of my mouth, that came right back out of me. So, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, man. And so and also too, I think that the idea for some people, the idea of man, I've got X amount of money and X amount of bills, and the difference of this $350 could be the difference of half of my car payment.
Mm-hmm.
That struggle in there. But then sometimes I think it's more difficult for people to tithe also when they can't see the fruit of what it bears.
Yeah.
And for a person, when they can purchase something from there, maybe receive a shirt, wear that shirt out to somewhere, maybe be at their group knitting club or their group bowling league,
yep,
and have that on. And now, not only do they have the physical product, but now they have the fruit of sparking up conversation, or having a common interest with somebody, or even somebody that's just curious, that's not a believer.
Yep.
Them being able to see the fruit of, okay, this was my... And it's not the same in the same way a tithe, because a tithe is giving just for the faithfulness to God.
Yep.
But that ability to give money to the church still, support it, and now have something that they can bring to also be able to see a fruit produced, could be a difference maker for some people, as I see it currently, with my understanding. Yeah.
Yeah, and one thing it's so hard to kind of to wrap that around, okay, I should be giving money to God, but I've got to feed a family. Mm-hmm. So how do you balance that? A lot of times somebody just they cannot afford to do that, but they can afford their time. Mm-hmm. That's why there's lots of different serving opportunities or group opportunities, but part of that too, when we talk about that and tithing, it's I have found myself so many times, it's so easy to go stop and get a coffee at Starbucks. It's so easy for me to drop $50 on a video game. Mm-hmm. Those things are so easy. Oh, but for me to have to put money in the offering plate when it comes by is so hard. But it's so easy for me to do it other ways. And that's where even when it came to trying to save for the boys and their future, it's you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take X amount of dollars and I'm going to automate it, and it's going to go to the church every single week, every single month. Yeah. Not because I want to be robotic about it, but because I don't want to have to ever forget. I don't ever want to have to, think about, part of what I have to do is tithe. I'm already doing it. It's in my budget. It's there. And I remember I'm a numbers geek, and I remember one time I was putting together a budget, right kind of when I started working for Journey, because I would say this: when I started at Journey, I had to take a very big pay cut to come there. And I remember my wife saying to me, God knows exactly what we need. So I'm redoing our budget to make sure that we can make ends meet. And I remember I put tithing at the bottom of the budget, and I looked at that and I'm like, it can't be at the bottom. I need to move it to the top. And over time, our ability to give has grown, commensurate to pay raises. And, my wife's a teacher. We're a dual income house. So we have more of that we can do, and we're more flat out comfortable with doing it because it's a heart thing. It's not anything else. It's obedience and heart.
Absolutely. 100%. And check how we're doing on time here. I see we're at about 60, and we did some before this.
Yeah.
Hot dog, we've been trucking along here, man. Dude. I feel like we've only just gotten into some things.
I know.
Man, so I'm trying to keep to the time frame that I gave you. Having gone over some of these things now, like, what for you are some three key takeaway things that you may want to depart onto the audience? And we've talked about a lot in terms of music, media, the spirit of how you approach people, how we've been influenced into the spirit of rebellion, merchandise in church. What amongst it all would you like to impart to a viewer?
Well, one thing that I would say, and this goes back to the earlier conversation we were talking about, how am I guiding my kids? And I would even say this about what I see about the residents and interns that we have at Journey. You're never too young or too old to start your faith journey. You just have to start it. And not be so rebellious and fight against the Holy Spirit would probably be the number one. From everything that we've talked about today, that would be probably the biggest thing, because it's a fight you're never going to win. So get in it early. Develop the early rhythms when you're young. Yeah, so that's probably the first one. Man, I think also, just not being conformed to the world, understanding where everything's place is. I enjoy watching a lot of Dragon Ball Z. Well, I used to anyway. I enjoy music. I enjoy video games, but those have to find their place in my life, and they can't be at the top. So take your spiritual walk journey seriously. I wish I would have started it earlier and put things in their proper place in your life. God has to be at the top, always. And the minute you lose sight of that, the more you struggle. And I know in my life when I'm struggling, I've always had a very up and down emotional season in my life. There's always been highs and lows. Some people they're even keeled all the way, and I envy that a little bit. But it's in those valleys where you have to learn how to trust and say, okay, well, I'm down here in this valley because I'm raiding 20 hours a week playing a stupid video game. Okay, you got to stop doing that, and you need to put those 20 hours into reading your Bible or listening to a pastor or joining a group or being in community with people. So that's 1 and 2. A third one, man, we've talked about so many different topics. We went so many different ways. I guess that last one would be, and this is something that Pastor Roddy really imparted on me, is God owns it all. You don't own anything. So don't be so tight-fisted with what you have, because God does own it all. And even like we get so hung up on like money and popularity. Devontae, I'm telling you, when I had all the money and I had all the popularity, I had nothing. And it was made so apparent to me. Like when my business failed, I'm literally, I was able to take an entire summer off working and spend that with my family. My wife's a teacher. She had the summer off where I didn't even have to worry about a paycheck. I didn't have to go into an office. Didn't have to do any of that. And I had another 3 months where I was looking for work. None of that time I had to struggle financially at all. But I was as low as I had ever been. Wow. So understanding that God owns it all, and having money, prestige, status means nothing. And giving your life to the Lord, and really, like, he created all of this for us out of the joy in his heart. Give him the recognition for it. That's all he wants. He wants us to love him and love what he's created for us, but know at the end of the day, I made it all, and you have to remember that.
Man, that third one there, and we didn't get to dive into a lot of the pieces of it, but when it came to the point where you were at that incredibly high place, like why do you think it was that you felt some of the emptiest being there? Like what did that look like on a day-to-day, week-to-week kind of thing, as far as what ended you up feeling empty in that?
I mean, God was not in the business. I was my business partner, like all the people that I had surrounding me were solid people, but God was just not in any of it at all. Like, you know, we would go on business trips. I've literally built networks for pharmacies all across the U.S., but not once did I ever say, God, come with me. I was just like, I am so smart and so rich now. Like how did I even fit on the plane? But no, God just humbled me because I didn't put him anywhere near it. And there were so many instances in my life where, like, I ran from God's calling so fast and so hard because part of it was uncomfortable. You know, and I didn't want to be like, you know, maybe this is just my need to fit in. I didn't want to be seen by people that I liked, you know, where I'm a religious fanatic, or that I'm a nerd because I love the Lord. Yeah. I cared more about what other people thought, the status of owning a company and being a business owner, when God never wanted that for me. You are a servant. You have lots of leadership qualities, but it's not to be the head of an organization. It's just not. Yeah. So I'm going to take that from you. I'm going to give you your money, but I'm going to bring you down here, and you're going to sit and wallow in this for a little bit until you see that I'm what you need. Yeah.
Man. That's so strong. No, I definitely get that, because I don't know how many pieces you've gotten to, but I've shared this on some other episodes, and that's that, like, even when it comes to the podcast that I'm doing now and whatnot, like, as you see, for those that don't know, right now I'm in a stage where I'm running the podcast out of the beautiful apartment that my wife and I have now. Previously we were doing it, and we still do go to the library sometimes to do that. I'll be doing that tomorrow with another interview I'll be doing. And the podcast in its current form was not the way that, if you would ask me about a half a year ago to 8 months ago, how I would be doing it. Yeah. Because about halfway into me first creating the podcast, I was with a media company, and I was getting strong in my faith. I was like really just putting that as like the top thing. And I went on a business trip with them, and it was we rode all the way back from Miami, 3.5 hours. And during that whole thing, it was me just blabbering away about the podcast and what I wanted to do about it. And at a certain point, they were like, okay, put together a proposal. We'll do something. And just from a couple pieces of content that I started to put out, people received it well. They thought it was really cool. They thought that it was good that it's focused so much on God and men and their roles. And that was a point I wanted to touch with you too.
Yeah.
Men and what I had said, the church is building weak men in 2020.
Yeah. Hey, we went a little sideways. It's all good, man.
But long story short on that is that the vice president of the company and I developed really good rapport. And he's a great man, and the managing partner I was with, great man. And they wanted the podcast, but they made it clear under no uncertain terms that their focus was on the money of it.
Yeah.
They were going to put up a few tens of thousands of dollars for it.
Yeah.
They were going to own it. And my job was, yes, to have the interviews, but more importantly that, how do we monetize this as quickly as possible?
Yeah.
And in the face of it, it hurts so bad.
Yeah.
But sitting there between talking to my wife, the reception that I got from some people that watched it, talking to my sponsor at the time, which I need to give a shout out to. Yeah. They were just like, nothing lined up to be like, hey, make money the focus of this podcast.
Yeah.
And it killed me. The proposal that I brought in was not the proposal that said, okay, you need X amount of $10,000, you need X amount of time, this is your plan to get it for it, this is like the ownership of the company. It was, you can be a sponsor of it.
Yeah. But
this is my podcast.
Yeah.
And literally that day I was fired from the company.
Oh, wow. Well, you had to find a hill to die on, you know? Man.
Oh, man. And so,
but here you are still doing the podcast and you've got ownership over it. So,
and so just as you say that, it just makes me think, like, as hard as it was at the time to say no, and then afterwards you're like, what, did I really just do this? Mm-hmm. I couldn't imagine doing this podcast any other way than talking to a plethora of, whether it's middle schoolers or young adults barely in the college world, or men that have been the head of CEOs or made six figures, or guys that are just regular schmegler guys who are struggling in and out of prison, maybe been through some addictions. I couldn't imagine the podcast being focused only on businessmen and business aspirations in the way that it was originally plotted to be. And it makes me happy to see that God has taken it the way it has. Yeah. And so you guys just know it's going to be hard turning down some of the prospects and opportunities. You're going to want to say yes so bad. Yeah. But it's worth it taking the leap of faith. Yep. Agreed. Agreed? Yeah, agreed. I said yes to the wrong thing many a time, dude. Right, and same. Yeah, I had said yes to the wrong thing a lot of times that were just either more convenient, that seemed profitable, and time after time, it either left me, it betrayed me, it let me go, it did all these things. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, okay, I've said yes so many times before to wrong. Let me try saying yes to right and no to attractive. Yeah. Even though I want to say yes. Yeah. So that was just my little thought that I had hearing you say that.